Good evening again and welcome again. This is the fourth Divine Mother session, and last session was really lovely, wasn't it? We did the basic 40-part body relaxation sequence with Tara mantras. So that was lovely. Do you remember? How did it feel? So well, actually, perhaps before getting into Divine Mother things, just a moment, I have to do something. All right, so before getting into Divine Mother and Shakti, matters of Shakti, I was thinking of talking about something very basic. The past week I've been editing the upcoming book entitled Buddhas Among Us, accounts, what is it? I forgot what's the subtitle. It's something like Buddhas Among Us, Westerners who attained full enlightenment. So written accounts from 6 members of our Sangha, Amrita Mandala Sangha, who attained emptiness, first stage of Buddhahood. And I've been editing those accounts and writing a foreword and introduction to that book, and then editing some additional materials to make it a bit more juicier in the light of the tradition and what realization attainments are from traditional perspective, which is what happens in our Sangha too. So something that I was thinking about, I think it was Tina who mentioned in her account that at some point of her life, before she was a practitioner, she realized that she had tried a bunch of different things to make her happy and to keep her happy, but none of the things in the world, partying, traveling, being in a relationship and so on, weren't able to do that, make her permanently happy, but just momentarily. And then she made a very obvious point, like she was explaining and explains in the account that you can read yourself next week when the book comes out. It will be out on the website and will be free of charge. And she explains how when she realized that she was seeking and wanting to be happy and content and trying all these different things, but they couldn't offer it, give it. And then she realized that her problem was in her mind. That the problem wasn't out in the world. The problem wasn't somewhere outside of her, but inside her, in her mind. And this is an obvious point, isn't it? People, all of you who joined this session, I think we have only Sangha members joining this session. You've heard this before and you've read it from dozens of Dharma books over the years. And it's such an obvious point. But isn't it that when we hit a rough patch, when we have a dark night, that exact point we forget? Doesn't it happen? You start, when you hit a rough patch and you have emotional struggles and anger and and whatever have you, anxiety, depression, what have you, then before we remember it again, there can be moments and periods when we actually start blaming our companions, our people close to us, our job, our employees, our money situation, our whatever. That we start to blame momentarily the external conditions we have in life. But then, it is kind of difficult to say what is early on in the path and what is an advanced stage. It is difficult to say, what is what, because it depends on several factors. But, when you're not that familiar, when you really haven't internalized the point that Dharma is about freedom from self-based habit patterns, then, it takes longer for these, that during dark nights you start blaming external situations for your problems. And also, of course, you can forget, not even having a dark night, you can not really having internalized and properly understood this point, of course, I'm not blaming anybody, but what also can happen is that, momentarily we forget about Dharma and forget about practice because partying and drinking and girl and boyfriends and traveling and money and all that becomes to the fore, becomes more important, and one might forget about the whole thing, which is of course fine. I've been asked, what one should do in the case this happens, that, one might practice for a couple of months and then forget about practice for a year until it starts tasting sour again. And I've been asked what to do, and I said that, don't force yourself to practice. Let your own readiness and willingness, karmic situation, let it ripen over time. But then my point that during dark nights we might momentarily lose what do you call that? It's like a, when we realize that our suffering and our confusion, our lack of happiness is because of how our mind works. That's really important. That's really, isn't it, the main motivator for our whole path? It keeps us motivated, in motion. It keeps us practicing when that point is clear to us. And of course, Shakyamuni Buddha, who's the main Buddha of our era, he taught the Four Noble Truths that can be summed up to 2 points. That there is suffering, which is because of the self-based habit patterns and emotional negativity, emotional reacting that happens in the mind. And the second one is that one can become free of it with the help of Dharma teachings. And Dharma teachings, it kind of might sound, to somebody it might sound that, oh, okay, that means that you become a follower of some religion, or you have to start believing some dogmas or some doctrines. But no. And this is why I think that, well, I've been trying in my work to kind of explain and express Dharma as in as easy way as people can understand it. so that people can understand it as easily as possible and can relate to it, can understand how it might touch their life and how it might benefit them. So liberation, the second main point of the Four Noble Truths is that we can become free of existential confusion, existential suffering, which is called dukkha in Sanskrit and Pali language. So what is the point that I'm trying to make is that this is something, this first point, understanding that our suffering is, our confusion happens in our mind. You know, when we have enough money and we have health, we have food, we have shelter, we have basic necessities. Basic necessities. You know, our situation would be different if we didn't have a shelter or a home, if we didn't have food, if we didn't have health. It would be a very different and instantly more difficult situation if we didn't have one of those three basic necessities. And of course, health is it's a relative thing. You know, you don't have to have like a perfect health to practice the Dharma, but it is very difficult to practice the Dharma when one is extremely ill. Although there has also been cases in the history as well as in our Sangha where people have been very ill and yet even reached Buddhahood. So depending on the illness and depending on the severity of it, it can be detrimental to practice of Dharma or it can be very beneficial, so that one ripens and goes through one's karmic problems very quickly. Because of course, you know, when you're ill, you don't brood on insignificant, trivial things and matters. You don't have time for that. And that is also an important point, not wasting our time. I think that this point, you know, when we understand through our first-hand experience that what is this existential pain, and then we are fortunate to have the karmic connection to Dharma, and whatever type of Dharma, whatever type, lineage or vehicle of teaching, then we don't waste time. At least that's how I feel it. That's how I felt that, you know, it took me relatively long time. Well, I feel that it took me quite a while to come in connection with Dharma. And then when I did, having had so much existential pain throughout my life until that point, it became really important. So I didn't and I haven't wasted my time because of that. So I think it is like that to people who realize those 2 points, that suffering is in the mind and that Dharma, or seeing reality of ourselves, knowing ourselves, is the key to become free of it. That Dharma is the key into the lock. So remind yourself about this. Remind yourself why you're doing this. Remind yourself why you're practicing. And you will do yourself a big favor if you do that. Also, maybe I could add that we need, if we, whatever, in our style of, in our lineage, we speak of bhumis. And we speak of this 13 bhumi model, which is the path map that we use from the unawakened state through all the stages in between until full enlightenment. So I see this regularly, that somebody is having hard time might plateau at some stage of practice. I remember Helena has talked about this. She plateaued, her bhumi openings stopped coming because she hadn't really connected with compassion. She hadn't really realized how important bodhicitta is. And interestingly, her plateau happened when she had opened up to the 6th bhumi on top of the head. And then she was there plateauing for a while, and then she realized how important bodhicitta is. And then the 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and even perfecting the first bhumi, within 1 month happened. Just because she realized that bodhicitta was the element that she was missing. And so that is like realizing the importance of bodhicitta is also very important. I remember when I started practicing soon 20 years ago, in January 23, it will be the 20th anniversary of my practice, my formal practice. And I remember when I started practicing Zen Buddhism those days, and there was chanting of bodhisattva vows at the end of the sittings, and we would have these little pamphlets, papers that we were reading the prayers and sutras and vows from, and because it said bodhisattva vows, for the first maybe couple of weeks or a month, I didn't actually read them aloud, because I had to take a moment to contemplate that if I swear, if I vow something, I want to understand what I'm vowing. So I took a moment, like a month or something like that, and then one day I realized that how important it is. And then, I started reading it, I started feeling it. I started feeling how important it is to not only to practice for our own benefit, but for the benefit of all beings, because we are all connected. And not only superficially connected, like it's not only something that you say that, okay, we're all connected, we're all in this together. It's not like that. We are actually connected through our subtle bodies. In tantric yoga, in tantra, we speak about the subtle body a lot. Nadis, chakras, energies. And we are actually connected with everybody, with all beings. It's like an endless web of connections. So I've spoken about that on a number of occasions, so I'm not going into that more. But bodhicitta is a central part of Mahayana Buddhism, Vajrayana Buddhism, and I would say that it's an essential part of in Hindu Dharma. It has been said in classical scriptures of Hindu Dharma, Lokaha samastaha sukhino bhavantu, which literally means all realms, all beings, may they be in the mood of enjoyment. May all beings of all realms be happy. In that thought there is compassion, care for others. So I was talking about plateauing and how developing bodhicitta can help. Of course, reminding oneself about one's motivation, that I already mentioned, it's also very important. Perhaps if somebody practices for a certain period of time and then loses the motivation to practice, and then she or he might be sitting on the couch in the evenings just watching television, bored, sipping beer or wine or whatever. Remind yourself about the basics of reality, the basics of Dharma. Sickness, old age and death are all on the way to embrace us. Sickness, old age and death. Remembering such basics tends to straighten the spine and make the mind ping clear. Tends to prioritize one's time and energy. And it makes sense, doesn't it? When you realize that this life might soon be over, then maybe you realize that it's not that useful to spend months just watching television or doing whatever you do just to kill time and kill your time in this body. So bodhicitta, sickness, old age and death. I remember when I was 14 years old, this was in 1993, when I was 14. There was an interview in the newspaper about this. We have two churches in Finland, Christian churches. One is Lutheran Church and the other one is Russian Orthodox Church. And I was baptized into Russian Orthodox Church as a children. Haven't been a member of the church for over 20 years anymore, but nevertheless. But there was an interview of a quite popular Russian Orthodox priest in the newspaper. And he said something, I don't remember anything about that whole interview, but I remember one sentence that he said. And he said that true wisdom comes from remembering one's mortality. I remember when I was reading that newspaper, that sentence just jumped at me from the paper. It felt so important. That's I cannot deny it. And nobody can deny. Death is coming. And will meet every one of us. And that remembering that death is coming, that we are mortal, it makes us prioritize. It makes our minds clear and sober, doesn't it? I started thinking that, can I think of an example when the opposite would have happened, when somebody became deadly ill and then did the opposite, that somebody became like very ill and then started partying and doing drugs and doing the opposite with their time what was left. Maybe such people exist. but I can't think of any example. Maybe I just haven't paid attention. So they, those people slipped by my attention. But what I have seen in many instances that people sober up. And we might be, we don't necessarily need to become ill, but we might be kind of buried and very focused about whatever is going on in our life, or we might be doing trivial things with our spare time, such as watching the television for hundreds or thousands of hours, or playing video games, or whatever typical samsaric activities. But because it is such an undeniable fact, our mortality, our impending death, it tends to straighten the spine and clear the mind, at least for some time, until it is forgotten and then needs to be remembered again. And exactly for that purpose, Dharma lineages, Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity, all the major religions and traditions speak about remembering these facts: sickness, old age, and death. Then I will just mention that there are all these different, different concepts or different systems that one can study, for example, inside Buddhism. And one of them is 6 paramitas, 6 perfections. 6 perfections is a Mahayana Buddhist presentation. It covers things like ethics, practice, realization, generosity, lifestyle. So it's a presentation that covers all the necessary things in life, all the basic elements in life, and how they how path can be brought into those aspects of our lives, or how those aspects can be brought onto the path of Dharma. Lifestyle, Lifestyle, ethics, generosity, practice, and realization. That it's all together. All together. It is not only realization. Or just like if we I was talking about bodhicitta, which means that we have genuine care and concern, and that bodhisattvas who have that compassionate view, that they do actions to try to help others, try to make people of this world aware that Dharma exists. But if you only practice bodhicitta in a meditative way, that you only pray to them and never actually do physically anything to help the suffering of others, or to alleviate the suffering of others, or to release the self-based confusion of others, that is not a proper sound understanding of bodhicitta. That's dumb bodhicitta. That's like half of the compassion, active compassion. So I just wanted to mention these few things: bodhicitta, sickness, old age, and death, 6 paramitas, 4 noble truths, to remind to remind us that these teachings are there to help us mature, to help us realize who we are. Who are we? What kind of energy are we? What is our true nature? And what is the energy of our true nature? And yet, how different is that energy of our basic nature compared with the energy that we live our daily lives with? That's the big question. Peak experiences, like meditative highs. Oh, 2 years ago I went to this pilgrimage in China on this holy mountain, and that was the best meditation I had on the top of that mountain. Or 4 years ago, oh, that retreat was so amazing. I never had such a good experience of meditation since. No. Our basic nature is within our reach, is possible to recognize always, anytime, any place, awake or sleep. And of course, we have regular Sangha members present in this session, but it is a good question also to ask and return to, that what is the energy of the basic state that we experience in these short sessions like this or longer retreats? And how is that energy that we discover in these intensives compared to our daily energy? And why is it that the clear, pure, fine, soft, open-minded, sober-minded, grounded, discriminative, I don't know if that's a word, why that energy isn't with us all the time? Theoretically, I know you all have studied the theory of the two-part formula and the two modes, selfless mode, self-based mind. You all know the theoretical answer. But what is the difference experientially? And why that difference is there? And why, when we step out or go out from our true nature, why do those stupid and silly and foolish and time-wasting habits become active? So in Tantra, we work with energies. Tantra can be defined as energy work. So work with your energy in your daily life. Whatever you do, waking up in the morning, washing teeth, having breakfast, putting your clothes on, going to work, commuting. With what kind of energy? What kind of energy moves when you move? What kind of energy do you bring into a room when you step through a door? This is also basics. Something that we develop as we progress, as we journey through the path, as we journey through the bhumis, we develop confidence. We become strong. We become confident. Another account, I remember Ugi mentioned in his account in the upcoming book, Buddhas Among Us. He mentioned that I don't actually read to which Buddhist Dharma teaching he was referring to, but he said that he read the same teaching 3 times over his journey through opening the bhumis and then perfecting the bhumis, through his journey of awakening and becoming fully enlightened, fully awake and aware. And he said that he read the same text 3 times, and the first time when he read it early on, when he had just maybe a couple of bhumi openings, that it was difficult to understand. Didn't make much sense. Was hard to understand. Even though the text was very clear what it was talking about, it was not written in vague or obscure language. And then he said that he read the same text sometime later. Maybe it was after he had opened Mahasiddha Bhumis, which means that the Buddha within him was with him most of the time and gave clarity to his mind, softness to his heart, groundedness to his body, and confidence in that sense. And he wrote that the second time he read it from this experience, it made so much sense. So much sense, like it was so obvious what the text was saying. And third time he wrote that he read the text, I don't remember, was it like during his perfection stage when he had perfected 8, 9 bhumis or something like this, or if it was after he perfected his 10th and had become a living siddha. But then he said that, how obvious is this? This is that it's easy. It's obvious, it's easy, it's apparent. No confusion whatsoever. And what is interesting in his comment in that narration is that he didn't kept studying that text. He kept studying himself and kept having awakening experiences, glimpses of the natural state, glimpses of himself as a living Buddha, and seeing himself as a living Buddha through the bhumi openings, bhumi perfections, which are cessations, when the whole mind structure built on around the notion of me, self, collapses for a moment before it starts to sneak back. So that's how he studied the Dharma. And that's how we mainly study it in our Sangha. I remember there is a Tibetan man and Lama, teacher, and a yogi called Dr. Nida, Nida, Nida Chenak Chung. I don't know if I pronounce his first name correctly or wrongly, probably wrongly. But anyway, I remember him saying that he was speaking of different styles of Dharma. He was speaking about the scholarly style, academic style, reading books, gaining information, and then coming up with degrees. Like in Tibetan Buddhism, there are these doctor degrees, like Geshe degree, Kempo degree, and so on. So, informational Dharma style, based on just like in Western universities, a lot of it is based on absorbing information and becoming wise in that sense. But Dr. Nida explained that the other style, what he called Mahasiddha style, is through experience. And this is, of course, what we practice in our Sangha. Experience is everything. And not just any experiences, but to access and recognize the Buddha within, our basic state, natural state, on daily basis. Whether it is through remembering ethics, whether it is remembering how to live our lives, meaning how and what we do for living, breaking the shell of the self, me, I, through being suddenly generous, giving instead of just taking to myself, but giving. That's generosity. Or whether it's accessing the basic state through remembering sickness, old age, and death, remembering bodhicitta, remembering any of the basic prayers or what is said in them, or recognizing the basic state through guru mantras, deity mantras, rainbow body yoga, or any of the techniques of rainbow body yoga. So we have in our style of Dharma or yoga, we have lots of variety of techniques. And that is good, because if we only had one or two techniques, it wouldn't work for somebody would like those techniques, somebody wouldn't. So in Tantra, it's common to have a lot of different techniques, different types. But yeah, that is most important, and that, according to Dr. Nida, Lama Nida, is the Mahasiddha style. How fitting is that, the name of that style? You know, we speak of Mahasiddhas in our Sangha all the time. Mahasiddhas, Mahasiddha style. I didn't know that it was called Mahasiddha style until that some call it Mahasiddha style until maybe 2-3 years ago, when I heard Dr. Nida say that in a lecture. But to me, this style of Dharma, where experience and recognition of the basic state is prioritized, is the only way of Dharma. To me, there is no other ways of Dharma. Why? Because I don't mean to sound rude, I don't mean to sound insulting, but you do not get to know who you are what the Buddha within is through reading books or through acquiring book information. It's an undeniable fact. It doesn't mean that book knowledge and understanding, knowing what many of the texts say wouldn't be beneficial and helpful. Of course, I'm not saying that. It is helpful. But you cannot replace first-hand experience. Why? Because the solution to our existential confusion is not theoretical, but experiential. It is not about the menu, it's about the food. So, it's already been almost 1 hour. So I just wanted to remind a couple of these basics. Does anybody have any comments? Feel free. Let's practice. Let's take a moment to align our bodies to sitting posture, whether sitting on cushions or chairs. If you're on a chair and if your back is okay, if you don't have any injuries or acute pains, don't lean against the backrest, but the back upright. If you're sitting on a chair, sit on the front edge of the chair, not so that your buttocks are not in the middle of the chair, but right on the front edge, because that helps to align the spine and allows to rest the whole body. On the other hand, if you have some back pain or pain elsewhere in the body, it is okay to lean against backrest or even to be lying down. And like always, align your body in a way that allows you to sit still without moving as long as possible, because it helps you to become aware of what is going on in your mind and energy. But having said that, if you have physical discomfort or pain, numbness, change or adjust your posture. There is no point in trying to tolerate physical discomfort. It is, what is that word? Counter something. Counter beneficial. The opposite of beneficial for practice. Counterproductive. So as you find that nice upright posture where you can just rest against the pull of gravity, just stop completely. Stop doing anything. Stop doing anything at all. Don't move your body. Don't move your eyes. Don't remind yourself about anything. Don't recall anything. Don't plan anything. You're simply stopping all actions, stopping all bodily or mental activities. After that, nothing. You just remain in this full halt, at full stop. Very physically, with your body. When internal chatter activates, you will probably feel the muscles in your jaws, tongue and mouth become little active. So stop that activity by again relaxing the mouth area and jaws. When seeking mode activates, or if you find yourself thinking that, okay, is this it? How can I make it better? Then I bet that your physical eyes are already moving. In that case, completely relax your eyes. Muscles in and around your eyes. Just remain without action, without doing anything. This is a very simple and straightforward exercise. You are a fine practitioner if you can sit like this for an hour without any troubles or confusions. And sitting like this doesn't mean that you would sit like a rock or a statue without anything happening. It means that your skills as a yogi, meditator are good and fine if you simply stop activities again when activities start. And you simply keep doing that whenever it's necessary. If you can manage that for 1 hour without problem, then very good skill, very good level, clear sign of having advanced in practice and being a mature yogini or yogi. Let's sit. Continue like this. So my instruction, just to remind you, if you forgot in 5 minutes, the instruction is that you remain all activities stopped. No planning, no reminiscing. You're not initiating remembering something. You're not initiating starting to plan something. Keeping your mouth, jaws relaxed, keeping your eyeballs, muscles in the area of the eyes relaxed, keeping body relaxed and yet upright. So let's sit together. No mantras, no prayers, no techniques, no practices. All right, very good. Join your hands. Make a bow. All right, so that was 20 minutes of sitting. Let's take a break for 15 minutes, 15 minutes, and during that break, I would like to ask you to conceptualize what you just experienced during this sitting, and then we will have discussion based on your comments, what you experienced. Okay, let's take a break for 15. Some context for this sitting before doing another session. I remember some years ago when I was still actively teaching in Finland, we had a group of Finnish regulars joining a live retreat here. Back in those days, we didn't even have online retreats. So we didn't know that it was a live retreat. But anyway, we had a retreat in Helsinki, I think, and we were practicing Tantra already back then. And people who had been practicing with me for years by then, all many of them knew was tantric practices, and tantric practices mean doing something, repeating a mantra, doing a visualization, doing some breathing exercise, doing. And I once, just like you might do to somebody who's learning to swim, putting that person at the deep end of the pool on the edge, and then pushing that person into the water to see if they have internalized and understood the previous lessons in swimming. This kind of sitting really reveals what one's level is. So it can be used and it can be taken as a test, though shouldn't be taken competitively. It's not a contest, but it's a fine way to test what those bhumi openings and bhumi events, and if you think you're a badass meditator, this is a way to test if you are or not. So, and of course, there's also I'm saying it straight up to you, people, that it takes quite a lot of practice and quite a lot of insight and maturity to be able to sit for 1 hour without any problems or issues. You just sit and can easily deal with if you have some, if you notice that you have started. If I use an analogy, well, I have an actual construction hammer here. So if you notice, figuratively speaking, that subconsciously you have grabbed a tool and are preparing to use it somehow, or your mind is doing something with thoughts or something, that it's easy to just let go of it and return to not doing anything. So, not to even mention that, letting energies and things in the mind functions really flow freely, that they are empty. For that, you have to have all the 10 bhumis purified to really remain lucid and, in a sense, like a natural for the whole hour or whatever duration of time you might be sitting. But my point is that to be able to do this for 40 minutes in one sitting or 1 hour even, you have to have solid skills. And I started this evening by talking about the basics and reminding us, for example, of the fact that our suffering and our confusion is in our mind, is in our thoughts, emotions, and in the subtle energy that makes us drowsy. And I've seen it, this is something that I mentioned just recently in one of the discussions in our Facebook Sangha, that I've seen it so many times over the years that usually like young men in their 30s, 40s, when they have a number of bhumi openings very fast, maybe even Mahasiddha bhumis open, but then, it's like bhumis are like plates on top of each other. So if there is only like a thin tunnel going through the whole bhumi stack, the plates are mostly undone, right? So even if there is a thin connection to Mahasiddha plates, you still might have like 97% of all the 10 karmic plates, bhumis 1 through 10, unfinished, which means that it directly affects your mind. How? Restlessness, impulsive thoughts, impulsive mind functioning, monkey mind, compulsive habits, desires, addictions, all of that. So in that sense, sitting for just 20 minutes or longer is a very necessary humbling experience. Brings you right down to the earth. So even if it is the case that most people over the years that I've seen who have opened their bhumis up to Mahasiddha bhumis, that there is in most cases there is like it's like a something completely new and fresh. I've seen it also. The point that I'm trying to make is that I've also seen that people start patting themselves on the back. Okay, now I'm a badass yogi. Now I really already know so much about Dharma and I have the natural state down. I'm a really cool, badass practitioner. And then it's good to really kind of do a reality check. And a good way of doing it is just sitting quietly and not doing anything. I remember there is actually a good story, it can be found from my blog, about Tulgu Urgyen Rinpoche, who was a lineage holder and master in Tibetan Kagyu and Nyingma schools of Tibetan Buddhism. And just to tell the story in a nutshell, there was an American lady who had an awakening experience with this very famous Hindu guru. And this lady was celebrated by the guru and the guru Sangha as, the person who had attained Buddhahood. Like she was celebrated as this really highly or even perfectly realized being. But then this lady, she went to see Tulgu Urgyen Rinpoche, who, as you might already know, had a completely different criteria for enlightenment. So this lady kind of boldly or arrogantly presented herself. I was just a couple of days ago, I was celebrated as awakened, enlightened being by this famous guru and I'm here to meet another master. In Tulgurians before him, and the story goes. It is written in a book, and you can find the story from the blog in detail. But he just calmly said that, okay, lovely. So let's do a little test. There was like a group of students there, and Tulgurian had said that, okay, let's do a little test. So you just sit there and we'll all be quiet, and you tell me when you have a thought. So remain as long as possible without thoughts, but then you tell me when you have a thought. And then, the lady somehow gave the impression that, okay, piece of cake, this is nothing because I'm a Buddha now. And then she had sat down and closed her eyes, and people were waiting. Tulgurkin was sipping tea. If he had smoked cigarettes, which I don't think he did, but that would probably been a moment when he would have smoked a cigarette. I don't know why I had that idea, but then after a moment, this lady's face became kind of started to look like some indication of doubt or stress and uncertainty, and then she opened her eyes and said that, well, I think that was a thought. And so the point of the story is that she had this awakening experience that was probably fantastic for her, but she didn't have a context. She didn't have a path map. She knew none of that, and she was made to believe that she was way more mature than what she actually was. And this was all, this whole whole belief and confidence came crumbling down with that simple test. So let's test. And I'm not too it's something healing to do this, and brings us down to earth. But also what I wanted to add when I talked about Tina's account before we started sitting, that she made the discovery early on that her confusion and troubles were in her mind. So when we practice sitting, not doing anything, it's you can see how your mind is same as before and how it is different. Or like I talked, what is the reason? I talked about energy of the natural state and energy of the samsaric state. So you can actually see your mind and see the energy of it. And you do need to know your mind and samsara thoroughly to be liberated from it. That is very important point. So let's sit a little bit more. So just to be clear, whatever emerges or happens as you sit like this, let it happen. If it gets murky, dark, confusing, sleepy, that's totally fine. Let it happen. But you're simply observing, being aware of anything happen, and in this way being forced to be realistic about your state of mind. right. James, could you lead vows and prayers, please?
I vow to liberate all sentient beings. I vow to end all self-based confusion. I vow to exercise the Dharma that frees. I vow to attain the great perfection. I vow to liberate all sentient beings. I vow to end all self-based confusion. I vow to exercise the Dharma that frees. I vow to attain the great perfection. I vow to liberate all sentient beings. I vow to end all self-based confusion. I vow to exercise the Dharma that frees. I vow to attain the great perfection. As usual, just taking a moment to absorb the blessings from the chant. I take refuge in the Guru. I take refuge in his pure land. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. I take refuge in the Guru. I take refuge in his pure land. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. I take refuge in the Guru. I take refuge in his pure land. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. I am the Guru, I'm in the Pure Land. I am the Buddha, I am the Dharma, I am the Sangha, I am the Guru, I'm in the Pure Land. I am the Buddha, I am the Dharma, I am the Sangha, I am the Guru, I'm in the Pure Land. I am the Buddha, I am the Dharma, I am the Sangha. May all beings be free. May all beings be free. May all beings be free. All beings are free. All beings are free. All beings are free. May all beings receive my accumulated merit. I dedicate the merit to the refuge and to all sentient beings. And putting our hands together and taking a bow.
Thank you, James. Maybe I'll just wrap this up. So this was a Divine Mother session. Do you agree or do you disagree? Why was it a Divine Mother session? Why it could have been a divine presentation of Divine Mother? It could have been other kinds of presentations as well. but it could have been, and it was, a presentation of the Divine Mother or Shakti. If you understand it already, then you do. If you don't, you will later. Just like I was telling what Ugi wrote in his Mahasiddha account to be published in a book. You know, he said that he read the same text 3 times. I still can't remember what it was. But anyway, that first he didn't understand it on first reading. The next reading he understood it, it made sense, and on third reading it was obvious, the points. Similarly, you know, when we this is actually something that people I haven't really been active on, like discussion forums in few years anymore, but when I was, people used to often ask questions like how does Zen meditation, how is it same or different from chanting mantras? Or questions like this, you know, how does, you know, what is this method better or is that method better? Is this technique better or that technique? And those kind of questions come from not understanding the basic underlying principles. And the principles are the Divine Mother or Shakti principle is the enjoyment aspect, is the energetic aspect of our basic state. While the clarity aspect, emptiness aspect is another underlying principle, another Buddha body of ours, Dharmakaya. And of course, you know, through the going through the journey of bhumis and purification, what comes about is that our mind that was previously problematic and causing us great deal of pain and confusion, at some point we realized that those very problems, those very confusions, that very mind is a door out of that confusion. That problem is the liberation. Or those problems in plural, you know. That sense of self that makes us small and contracted and unnatural is a gateway to freedom, to liberation. And when this confusion, self-based confusion, decreases over months and years of practice, even if we didn't pray to the Divine Mother, well, we already do in basic prayers, but even if you didn't like use Divine Mother Shakti mantras or something like that, like do a formal practice, this aliveness of the basic state comes as our mind keeps getting clearer and more sober. The Divine Mother, the enjoyment body, Sambhoga Kaya, is there all along. And then, when you go through the whole journey, then you understand this perfectly well. You become an embodiment, you could say, of Divine Mother as well as Divine Father of the masculine principle. You become a Buddha, fully awake and aware, radiating energy that is clean and pure. Untainted, is that the word? Untainted? Energy that is not dirty. And in a sense, at that point, one has transcended I was going to say transcended Divine Mother or Divine Father, and perhaps it is right to say that at that point one simply embodies these Buddha bodies: enjoyment body, emptiness body. It's a few minutes over time, but I would like to take, if you have comments, and I would especially like to hear Helena's comment about these sittings.